welcome everyone to this session, Mantras for All-Weather and Resilient Indigenous Enterprises. Uh, there's a famous Chichuwa, it's a language proverb that literally translates as catch them young while young and watch them grow. So the saying emphasizes the importance of a child's formative years and how whatever happens at this early stage has a bearing in a child's later years. And if that proverb had a face in the startup ecosystem, that probably would be Mr. Sanjeev Bikhchandani. He has been an early backer of Zomato, Policy Bazaar, and many such startups which are now large enterprises. A brilliant businessman, an astute investor, and a prolific teacher, Mr. Sanjeev Bikhchandani, founder and executive vice chairman in InfoEdge. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So to start with, I'll go back to your early entrepreneurial days, and when you started your career as an entrepreneur, you did not take salaries for years, as I've learned, and even taught over the weekends to pay your bills. So recently I heard a founder who was trying to raise money on one of the very famous funding shows that they were taking a lot of money as salary and cited that they were living in an expensive area. How do you respond to it? I mean, theirs is a business which is just starting out. Is this justified today? Probably because when you started, VC money was not available. Today it is available.
Look, no value judgments here, and to each his own. But I'm a great believer in companies and entrepreneurs being frugal early on, quite simply because ultimately you have to make a profit, right? And in the beginning, you're never sure of your revenues. The only thing in your control are your costs. So it's generally a good idea to keep your costs low. It's also a good idea to for a founder to sort of really take a decent salary when the company is profitable. Because as an investor, I get slightly uncomfortable if we see founders getting rich on investor money, as opposed to founders who get to profit, create value, grow the company, possibly list the company, and then they're earning market close to market because they will be fabulously wealthy on the value of the stock.
Okay, all right. So I've observed a lot of founders now. You said that, they're becoming rich rather than the company becoming rich. So I've observed that a lot of founders have loss-making businesses. They're running loss-making businesses, but they become investors. Probably I may be wrong, but don't you think we must clean our houses before we go out and do public service?
Well, so I'm not sure investing is public service.
I mean,
if they're investing, they're they're hoping to make a return on it, right? So look, there are two ways to look at it. One is to say that, look, you have money to spare. That's why you're investing. And your company is loss-making, so how on earth do you have money to spare? That's a valid question. But the other is, look, if founders don't invest in other founders, then who will invest in founders, right? So if India is to build an early stage risk capital VC investing sort of industry, I think founders will have to play a key role as investors. The question is of when, before you make a profit, after you make a profit, that's a matter of degrees. So I'm a little ambivalent on this.
Okay, all right, thank you. Also, so we've seen in the past couple of years at least that there was a rush to go for IPOs, despite being whether they're profitable or not, these businesses. So what do you think? Do you think in any way the way VCs are constructed in this country where LPs expect return in 10 years or so, that the companies really need maybe probably 15 years or so to become viable and mature? Do you think that's something that's affecting the ecosystem altogether?
We have seen cases, right, where some companies have been able to go public earlier than 15 years. Let's take a look at Mamaearth. Mamaearth, I think, was 6 or 7 years, if I'm not wrong. I'm hoping that going forward, companies can go public faster. There's now the SME exchange that is allowing smaller companies to go public. Let's see how the ecosystem evolves over the next 5 years. But I hope this will change. But yes, exits are important. If you don't get good exits, then venture capital will not come back again and again. Investors will not come back if they have to wait too long. So we need to create an ecosystem where there are adequate and appropriate methods of exit. Because what we have seen is strategic sales are few and far between, or strategic sales at the kind of valuation that will give a VC investor any kind of joy are few and far between. And therefore, perhaps, it's good if companies can go public slightly earlier.
So do you think we might need a little bit of push to grow some indigenous VCs where they can have longer vision or they understand the system better?
See, the government is pushing domestic capital. It is pushing, encouraging domestic venture capital industry. There is a fund for startups, which is really a good move by the government. But even Indian venture capitalists will have a fund has a life, right? That life is 8 plus 2 years, 10 plus 2 years, typically. Which basically means that if you're going to be investing in the first 3 years, then you're going to be harvesting in the last 3-4 years. You're talking about being invested for about 5-6 years into a company, maybe 7 years. Now, is that long enough for a company to go public? That's a question. Can you get a strategic sale at any kind of value? That's the question. I don't think things will materially change just because there are domestic investors, because the life of a fund will remain the same. The real issue is fund life. Now, if you say I will have a 20-year fund, you may not get investors.
Okay, all right. So, following the, what we just spoke about, so, what should founders really look at when they're going for a fund? Should they look at, what kind of DNA should they look at? Because there could be aggressive funds with, better term sheets, but there could be people who could handhold them through and guide them through the maze. What's your advice?
Well, look, the way you've asked the question, the answer is obvious, but I'll tell you something. Very few investors actually do a lot of hand-holding, right? The secret of early stage investing, successful early stage investing, is to actually invest behind a company and a founding team who are going to succeed anyway, with you or without you. Now, if you tell me that, I can tell you that Zomato, Deepinder Goyal would have succeeded anyway, even if we were not the investors. Policybazaar, Yashish Dahiya and team would have been successful anyway, even if we were not the investors. Have we added value beyond the money? Answer is yes. But is it crazy value? Perhaps, perhaps not, right? So I think as an investor, you've got to be humble enough to recognize that it is the founders and the management teams that make a company succeed and not the investors, right? What you want is, I think, role consensus and role clarity. भाई तू investor है, तू अपना काम कर, हम founder हैं, हम अपना काम करेंगे, and we'll hopefully have open conversations, and we'll have a cordial relationship, and we will support each other, and we'll be understanding of each other's problems and challenges, and we'll get along, right? So chemistry is important, investor compatibility is important. I think most of all, investor patience is important. Because if a company is going to take 8 years or 10 years or 15 years to succeed, you need to be patient. We invested in Policybazaar first in 2008. 16 saal baad, we are still the largest shareholder. We invested in Zomato first in 2010. 14 saal baad, we are still the largest shareholder. And the truth is, now we invested from our balance sheet, not as a fund. Balance sheet investing means that you have an infinite time horizon. There is no life of fund. I have to get an exit by this time. And if I look at when the maximum value has been created, it's been in the last 4-5 years. Which means if we had been a fund and invested, we would have exited by a certain time and we would have only realized X amount of value and not Y amount of value. So India needs patient capital. Okay, I think that's a number one lesson.
Yeah, and not everyone gets lucky to get that kind of capital. But talking about Zomato, I think you were the only investor.
No, but we had that kind of capital because Naukri is profitable. So the lesson to all founders, bhai, profit banao.
Yes, and I think you are also a champion of getting money from the customers and not only from the VCs. I think that's another way.
Yeah. I mean, so look, I quit my job and became an entrepreneur in 1990. We launched Naukri in 97. For the first 7 years, we drifted into a whole bunch of small things. When we launched Naukri, it was seemingly one more small idea. There was no venture capital. So we bootstrapped Naukri for 3 years. Right? In those 10 years, we had to get customer money to survive because we had no money. We had to break even to survive. I think getting customer money is really, really important because that's how you build a sustainable business. And if you get customer money, the investor money follows because investors love to invest behind companies getting the customers' money. But if you get the investors' money first, it does not mean the customers' money will follow.
Correct. So I'll stay with the Zomato story a bit. I think you were the first, you were the only investor for the first 3-4 rounds, probably?
Yeah, we were solo in the first 4 rounds.
Yeah. So just for understanding for entrepreneurs here and for us, that what made you believe in them? I mean, I think they were called Foodie Bay at that point in time, very small, Dipender, and very young. What made you stick to them?
I think good people, great idea, good execution, very good consumer insight, very great customer clarity. They had built something the customer wanted, and we could see that. And we put in a small sum of money initially, small by today's standards. We put in 4.5 crores, right? And said, let's see where it goes. But you see, what happened was that while we were solo for the first 4 rounds, in each of those rounds, there was a competitive term sheet. So we knew that others wanted to do this thing. So there was validation. Even though they didn't put the money, they made the offer. And for us, that gave us confidence. It looks like we are not the only ones who recognize what's going on here to put more money. So bit by bit, now the other thing is, see, Naukri was making money every quarter, every month. वो पैसा आ रहा था, उसका कुछ पैसा हम यहाँ पे डाल रहे थे. Because our treasury policy is conservative, हम fixed deposit में डालते हैं, तो वहाँ पे 6-7% मिलता था. तो ऐसे 6-7% ज़्यादा मिल जाएगा. Let's put it here, see what happens.
Right. And it paid off well. Thank you so much. With your permission, may we take a couple of questions from the audience? If there are questions, we have a couple of more minutes. If there are any questions, anyone? I see one hand there. So please introduce yourself before asking a question and keep it very short and to the point if possible, please. Can we have a mic there? There.
Hi, my name is Kamal. I represent a brand called Veg Non-Veg. It's a
Sorry,
sneaker.
a brand called?
Veg Non-Veg.
Veg non-veg, okay.
It's a sneaker and streetwear brand. But I have a question. As a young founder, there is always a dilemma between bootstrapping and getting the VC money. And there is always, VC money is, sexy, if I would say. But bootstrapping is important as well. What do you suggest for young founders, especially who are working or on an idea which doesn't really have a customer interaction to start with?
देखिए, like I said, I think investor compatibility is important. Investor chemistry is important. Most of all, do you and the investor share the same time horizon, right? So Yashish Dahiya, founder of Policy Bazaar, told me something very insightful once. तो हम तो वहाँ पे 2008 से हैं, यानी कि 16 साल, right? About 7-8 years ago, Yashish Dahiya told me, Sanjeev, I have a problem. So I said, what? He says, yeah, I want to run a marathon, but my investors who are with me want to run a sprint. Because उनको तो निकलना है 5 साल में, मेरे को कोई 30 साल चलानी है. So how do I ensure that they get a 5-year exit while I continue to run it for 30 years? So the time horizon compatibility is something you need to think through. I think strategy compatibility, strategy consensus is something you need to think through. There are businesses sometimes that take 15 years to scale, that no matter how much money you put in, 15 saal lagenge, right? And if you put in too much money too soon, right, the business may not grow that much, but you would have spent the money. And that somehow will create an impression with investors that यार ये तो useless business है. But शायद useless business नहीं था. शायद आपने ज़्यादा पैसे डाल दिए. So think those things through. There's no one universal answer. Maybe you should raise the money. Maybe if you don't raise money and competition raises money, you'll have a problem. So there is no one size fits all. You have to evaluate your own situation specifically.
All right, thank you.
So good
Okay,
morning.
last question maybe because we have run out of time, but yes, please go ahead.
I'm Veteran Wing Commander Sudhakaran. I run a,
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm Veteran Wing Commander Sudhakaran. I run a deep tech startup called Q Gates. I did.
Sorry, what's it called?
Q Gates, Quantum Gates.
Quantum Gates, okay.
I served a good 20 years in the government, and then I realized if you have to really walk the talk, you need to dirty your hands, and then I raised this startup. But then my question today is, the kind of money that deep tech requires, it's insane. Like the large language models which we go gaga over, it takes something like 6,000 GPUs with each GPU costing nothing less than 45 lakhs. And the problem is our ecosystem is not ready to fund. While we talk about a lot of funding coming from the government for the average startup, but the government doesn't have a clue to go beyond 10, 15 crores. And 10, 15 crores for this is a sneeze. What do you think is the correct strategy? If we don't indigenously develop these things, we are gone forever, and we don't even understand those threats. We're not even talking about it. So how do you think we address this challenge and gap in funding, which requires thousands of crores to, and that too in private startups?
So I don't have an answer, and I don't have a solution, but it's a problem, right? But see, if you're saying there should be private investors in venture capital funds which will put in these thousands of crores, there has to be some idea of getting a return in 8 years, 10 years, 12 years. Beyond that, VC investors will have a challenge investing. Secondly, taking very large bets in a company that's going to deliver a prototype 3 years out, revenue 6 years out, maybe, is a challenge, right? The risk has to be spread. Maybe the answer lies in getting strategic investors where you have large corporations which are interested in that area, right? Putting in money from their balance sheet. But even they may not put thousands of crores into a company. Is the answer getting overseas capital? Many people seem to think that, but then you're talking about externalizing your company. And then if you're in a defense tech space or you're in a strategic space, that becomes a challenge of the government of India, right? So it's a complicated situation, sir, and I don't have an answer, okay? But I'm sure an answer will emerge in the next 2-3 years because the government will find solutions.
All right, thank you so much. We have run out of time, but one question, Sanjeev, which I would want you to answer very quickly, is that from the recent Google Play Store episode, what are our learnings? Because this session is about resilient entrepreneurs. So, and in Indian version, is that the answer? If that's so, how do we go about it?
No, look, it's complicated, right? Building an Indian app store is not going to be easy, right? Getting it to be popular with enough apps, getting it to be downloaded, enough apps downloaded from there is not an easy solution. I mean, it's going to be very hard to achieve. I think there's going to be a constant conversation with Google so that there's some reasonableness on all sides, right? Is very important. I think maybe some regulation remains to be seen. So this is an open question. It's not a solved problem yet.
All right. I think we have 120 days before we have got a relaxation of 120 days, and the court is going to hear it on 19th of March again. So what should we, like, I'm not asking you to tell me what should be our hope that will amicably solve this issue probably?
I think it's best if Google and the apps agree on something. I don't know what that will be.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Mr. Bikhchandani, for joining us here. As it's always a pleasure to hear from you lessons from your own experience, which has been a critical catalyst in maturing this ecosystem. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.